Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And so, of course, we got to pick up with some good old Excalibur. Now, here's the thing, because in my last video I did when it came to covering Legion Quest, I have mentioned the fact that when it came to all the different X books leading into Age of Apocalypse, they all kind of ended the same type of way. And what I mean is that at the very end of each X book, you had your X team or X hero going through a certain moment, except at the very end of the book, they all returned to crystals. And the reason why, because, well, their timeline was technically ending and a brand new timeline was coming to life, the Age of Apocalypse timeline. And so for the next few videos we're going to do when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men, we're going to see that right there, where you're going to see each book end on that same type of note where it's like, oh my God, can our heroes pass this certain moment they're going through? But then at the very end, they're frozen in time and completely erased to bring in a new version of themselves from the Age of Apocalypse timeline. Now, something else I do want to mention when it comes to Excalibur issue number 86 is that it's bringing back the whole idea of Genosha. Now, Genosha plays a very important role when it comes to X-Men comics. And let me explain why. Because in the early days of X-Men comics, when it came to Genosha, we were kind of told that it was this perfect country. They had no issues at all inside their country. But in reality, they had a lot of problems. You see, inside the country, what they did was they took mutants and turned them into slaves as a way to help build up their country. Now, thanks to the X-Men getting involved, you then had the old government go away and a new one came in to allow mutants and humans to be equal to one another. The problem was that right after that, they were then hit by the legacy virus. Now, the legacy virus played a major plot line at this point in time in X-Men comics. The legacy virus was brought back in time by Strife as a way to attack the mutant race by killing them off one by one, left and right, across the entire world. The problem is now the legacy virus has supposedly evolved, and now it's going after humans as well. Now, by this point in Marvel's timeline, it's only one human who has been affected by the legacy virus, and that would be Moira McTaggart. Now, for me personally, I kind of feel like this was Marvel back then in the 1990s trying to tell us like, hey, guys, what if Moira McTaggart is a mutant and not just a human? But hey, that's just me. But either way, when it came to Genosha, the legacy virus hit that country pretty hard. A lot of mutants died, but that took place over in X Factor Comics. So we have not seen Genosha in a very long time. We have no idea how they are since that moment where the legacy virus hit them pretty hard. But this video, we're going to learn things got even worse in that country. But before we are able to properly pick up what's happening in Genosha, we have to jump over to a different country, and that would be Thailand. Now, really, we're going to pick up in a small area in that country called, and guys, I am going to mispronounce the name, Rastafan. Now, Rastafan was an old airstrip slash base that was used by the CIA in the Vietnam War. But of course, by this point, they had abandoned the place. But the problem is, after they had left, you had different terrorist groups being able to work out of that old base. The problem is that that old base was a tad bit too close to Great Britain. So they had a big problem with the whole idea of a terrorist group working out of that base. And so they had sent in a character known as Peter Wisdom, a mutant, to go ahead and kill off every single person who was a terrorist working inside that base. And so for Peter, it was one of the worst jobs he ever did because he was now wishing that he had quit a long time ago because he had killed so many people inside that one place. But now we have to jump over to Brian Braddock, and technically not at first, because at first we do pick up with this moment in time where we see all these different people who may be from Genosha being scared of what's happening around them. They were basically saying that this is the apocalypse. but we also see a guy who looks like Peter Wisdom getting shot by a bunch of bullets. Now, with all that being said, we then jump over to Brian Braddock. And this is where we're reminded that for Brian Braddock, he was lost in time for a good period in time in Excalibur comics. But while being lost in time, the dude saw a lot of different things about the main Marvel Universe timeline. And so every once in a while, he has a small episode where he sees different flashes of different things to come down the road when it comes to the main Marvel Universe timeline. But the thing is, while he had one of those episodes, he was working on the hovercraft that belonged to Moira McTaggart. Now, for Moira McTaggart, she hates the idea that her hovercraft was even touched by Brian Braddock. Like, yes, Excalibur has the right to use it, but to her, she loved the way her hovercraft looked. And now she hates the idea of how it looks right now. Like, the man gave it a whole bunch of different upgrades to supposedly help Excalibur out in the field. Now, with all that being said, you did have Kitty Pryde say, hey, listen, we need all hands on deck right now up in the observation room. And the only reason why she said that because she realized that there was some aircraft that's flying around Muir Island over and over and over again. And so because of that, she's kind of like, hey, listen, I find this a tad bit sketchy, but then you have that aircraft being able to communicate with Kitty Pryde, asking, hey, can we land on Muir Island? Because we came here for a very good reason. And so this kind of leads into a callback to the early days of Excalibur, because in the old days, there was this intelligence group known as WHO, and it stands for Weird Happening Organization. They would go around the world to investigate weird things happening across the world, but especially in Great Britain. But by this point in Marvel's timeline, the entire group is completely gone. But the thing was, they had been replaced by a brand new organization, and that would be Black Air. Now, we do pick up with 3 agents, Michelle, Threadgold, and also Pete Wisdom. Now, apparently they came here for a special reason, and the reason why, because what's happening over in Genosha. Now, like I said earlier, when it comes to Genosha, they had gone through a lot in a very short period of time. But the last time we saw them, a bunch of mutants were dying by the hands of the legacy virus. And the thing is, to kind of find out, things have gotten worse. The entire economy had basically crashed. And so now you have mutants and humans fighting against each other all over the country. Now, at first, the mutants, they had the advantage. And the reason why? Because they have powers. Humans don't. But then out of nowhere, humans were able to get a special type of bullets to use on mutants. And so right now, the humans have the advantage over the mutant race. And that right there is a huge problem. So for Black Air, what they want to do is send Excalibur into Genosha to kind of stop both sides from fighting against one another, but to also learn more about this special type of bullet. Now, while you have the entire conversation going on, we get the idea that Pete Wisdom does not like Excalibur at all, but especially Brian Braddock. Now, unfortunately, we do not learn why this man has so much hatred for Brian in this video, but after Age of Apocalypse, we're going to learn a whole lot more about Brian Braddock's family, especially his father. But now we have to jump over to Douglock and also Rory Campbell. Now remember, when it comes to Douglock, he is a phalanx. Now he was only created off the dead cells of 2 different characters, Doug Ramsey and also Warlock. Now, Doug Ramsey died back in Fall of the Mutants, and for Warlock, he also died but in a different storyline, better known as the Extinction Agenda. Now, with all that being said, when it came to the Phalanx, they were able to create Douglock out of those 2 characters' dead cells. The problem was he was still technically a mutant in some ways, and so he was able to break away from the rest of the Phalanx. He's still a robot that's trying his best to learn everything about the world, especially human feelings. Now, I want to focus more on Rory Campbell here, because remember, we had saw in an earlier storyline that there's a huge possibility that Warwick Campbell might turn into a character known as Ahab. Now remember, Ahab is an evil character from a different timeline, better known as the Days of Future Past timeline, where Rachel Summers comes from. And he saw his future self. And so his main goal is to make sure that he does not turn into that character at all. But let's jump over to Nightcrawler because, like I said earlier, when it comes to the legacy virus, there's only one person right now technically affected by the virus who's a human, and that would be Moira Taggart. And so for Nightcrawler, he was able to figure out who that person could be because he said, listen, I only know 2 humans right now that have been working on the legacy virus. That's Moira Taggart and also Warwick Campbell. And so for Nightcrawler, he said, it's you. It has to be you, the one human who have been affected by the legacy virus. And so Moira Taggart, she hates the idea of admitting the truth, but at the same time, she now knows that other people are going to figure out that she has now been affected by the legacy virus. But she tells Nightcrawler, just leave and go help out Genosha, please. And this kind of leads into the ending of today's storyline because with this story that Warren Ellis was working on, it did get interrupted with the whole idea of Age of Apocalypse. You see what I mean here in a moment, but you do have our heroes head over to Genosha. Now, when they do arrive there, they realize that it's a pretty bad state right now for Genosha. You have all these different mutants out there trying their best to survive, humans as well. Buildings are destroyed. It looks completely horrible, but things get even worse because for our heroes, as they're flying over Genosha and getting a good look of the country, they are then hit by some missiles. And so unfortunately, they're now about to crash into Genosha. But like I said earlier, when it came to Legion Quest, at this point in time in Marvel Comics, by the end of that storyline, you had all the different X books in on the same type of note where you had our X heroes, our X characters be frozen in time and then completely erased because a new world was coming into picture, the Age of Apocalypse. So for our heroes, they're now crashing towards Genosha, but at the very last second, they are completely frozen in time. And just like that, we then go into, well, Age of Apocalypse, where this series was replaced with a different series. And that series was called Excalibur, but we'll cover that series as we dive into Age of Apocalypse. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.